Betrayal never announces itself. It creeps in quietly, one indifferent glance at a time, until the person beside you feels like a stranger who just happens to know where you keep the sugar. That morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles, bright and merciless. I was still in my robe, hair loosely tied, hands around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The air smelled like burnt toast and finality. Michael stood by the doorway, a suitcase at his feet. His favorite leather jacket hung over his arm, the one I bought him for our 5th anniversary. It was supposed to last a lifetime. Turns out lifetimes are shorter than you think. He cleared his throat. I'm not happy anymore, Claire. The words dropped like stones into still water, spreading ripples I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. I watched him carefully. When did you decide that? He avoided my eyes. It's not one thing. It's everything. You don't laugh anymore. You've changed. That was true, but not the way he meant it. I'd changed because he'd stopped listening. Because every time I tried to talk about us, he scrolled through his phone, chasing approval from people who didn't matter. You're right, I said softly. I did change. I stopped pretending everything was fine. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. Vanessa makes me feel alive. There it was, the name I'd felt hovering between us for months. Vanessa, alive? I repeated, forcing a small smile. You mean expensive? He blinked, caught off guard. That's not fair. Fair? I set my mug down. Fair would have been telling me when it started. He pressed his lips together, then said, almost defensively, Vanessa understands me. She pushes me to want more. I tilted my head. More what, exactly? Money, status? People's attention? His silence answered for him. Michael, I said quietly, you used to dream about peace. Remember? You told me you wanted a home filled with laughter, not noise. You have that. You just stopped noticing, he shook his head. Peace is boring when you're starving for excitement. I laughed once, bitter, surprised. Excitement? You're calling adultery excitement now? His jaw tightened. You've become so cold. No, I said, stepping closer. I've become clear. For a moment we stood there, two ghosts of what we used to be. I searched his face for the man who once brought me tulips just because it rained. All I saw was someone already halfway out the door. He picked up his suitcase. I'm sorry, Claire. I can't keep pretending. I nodded slowly. Neither can I, he hesitated. You deserve someone who appreciates you. I had him once, I whispered, before he started chasing reflections. He turned, gripping the doorknob like it might save him. Vanessa believes in luxury. She believes in success, in what we deserve. Then I hope she can afford your definition of it, I said. He frowned, confused by my calm. Maybe he expected tears begging chaos. Betrayers always do. It makes them feel justified, but I wasn't about to perform grief for his comfort. He opened the door. Morning light framed him, sharp and unforgiving. Goodbye, Claire. Goodbye, Michael. The door clicked shut, a simple sound, yet it echoed through every memory we'd built. For a long time, I didn't move. I listened to the silence swallow his footsteps, then the hum of his car starting outside. When it finally faded, I whispered into the empty room, You just walked out of an empire, darling. You just don't know it yet. Later that day, I sat on the balcony, city skyline stretching endlessly ahead. From this height, people looked like pieces in a game only I understood. Maybe that's why I never told Michael about my real life. He wasn't ready to play on my board. I took a sip of wine and let the truth settle in. The man who left me thought I was ordinary. He thought I needed him. He never knew that the account his salary went into was one of my subsidiaries. He never guessed that the client dinners I attended were board meetings he couldn't dream of entering. He never realized the quiet woman beside him signed checks that kept entire companies alive. It's strange how you can love someone and still hide your magnitude from them. I used to think humility protected love. Now I knew it only protected his ego. The city lights began to flicker on, each one a heartbeat. I felt a calm resolve rise inside me, not the fragile calm of heartbreak, but the steady kind that follows revelation. He thought leaving me would elevate him. He had no idea he'd just demoted himself from my world entirely. I turned my phone over on the table. A message notification glowed from my assistant. Board meeting moved to tomorrow, 9 a.m. Also, new property acquisition finalized. I smiled faintly. Tomorrow, business would continue as usual. Only one thing had changed. Michael no longer existed in my narrative. Still, as the night breeze swept through my hair, I whispered to the stars, let him believe he's winning, for now. Because deep down, I knew something he didn't. Life always circles back, and when it did, he'd learn the most painful truth of all. The woman he left behind wasn't just strong. She was powerful enough to own the world he was chasing. Please subscribe our channel. The morning after Michael left, I stood before my mirror for the first time in days. Not to cry, not to mourn, to remember. My reflection stared back, pale skin, tired eyes, messy hair, but beneath it all was someone who'd been quiet for too long. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm. For years, I'd lived inside a disguise called normal. I wore it well, simple clothes, humble smile, small talk about grocery prices and neighbors' pets. I let Michael believe I was a regular woman who needed his credit card to buy a new dress. He never knew my dresses came from a designer whose boutique I secretly owned. He never asked where I went every Wednesday. He assumed it was yoga. It was actually the day my private car picked me up for board meetings across town. Meetings where I signed deals that made men like him millionaires, and I made myself a billionaire without anyone realizing. I didn't marry Michael for his wealth or charm. I married him for peace, for a love that didn't need to prove anything. But when he started craving more, I realized he wasn't chasing success. He was chasing validation, and I couldn't compete with that. So I stopped trying. That afternoon, my assistant Evelyn walked in carrying her usual folder of updates. She was the only person who knew everything. My finances, my investments, even my silence. She took one look at me and frowned. "You look calm." "That scares me." I smiled faintly. "Good. It should scare him too." Evelyn smirked. "So, it's true then? He's gone?" "Yes, to his new goddess of luxury." I stirred my coffee. "Let's wish them divine expenses." She laughed. "Do you want me to cancel the property transfer we planned for his birthday?" I paused, then shook my head. "No, let it go through, but redirect it to my charity trust. He doesn't deserve a mansion. The kids in our shelter do." Evelyn's expression softened. "You really loved him." "I did," I admitted. "But love without respect is charity, and I'm done donating." The next few weeks passed like chapters I'd already written in another life. Business thrived. My companies expanded. The world kept turning, and yet somewhere I knew Michael was beginning to stumble. It started with whispers. Vanessa, the woman he left me for, had been seen dining with another man, a real estate investor from New York. Then came the calls from mutual friends, pretending to check in. They'd say things like, "Claire, have you heard? Michael's new firm isn't doing so well." Or, "Vanessa's lifestyle is expensive. He's trying to keep up." I'd simply smile and reply, "Everyone pays for what they think they deserve." But in private, I wasn't gloating. Not yet. I was observing, studying the rhythm of karma as it quietly set its trap. One evening, Evelyn entered my office with a tablet. "You need to see this." It was an online article. Entrepreneur Michael Hensley faces lawsuit after failed investment. There he was, his photo beside Vanessa's, both looking exhausted and defensive. I leaned back in my chair, letting the irony sink in. The man who once lectured me about ambition had lost everything trying to impress a woman who only wanted his wallet. But still, I didn't reach out. I didn't post cryptic quotes or text him bitter goodbyes. Power doesn't chase revenge. It lets the world do the talking. 3 months later, fate decided to be dramatic. I was attending a charity gala for women entrepreneurs at the Langston Hotel. The ballroom shimmered in gold and soft music, and guests whispered names that made newspapers. I stood near the bar, glass of champagne in hand, when I heard a voice behind me. A voice I hadn't planned to hear again. "Claire?" I turned, and there he was. Michael, thinner, paler, eyes dimmed like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. The confidence he once wore like armor had melted into awkward humility. "Michael," I said smoothly, "you look surprised." He stared at me, disbelief flooding his features. "You're here? At this event?" "Yes," I said. "My company sponsors it." His jaw twitched. "Your company?" I smiled. "One of them." For a second, he just blinked, trying to process. Then his eyes darted around the room, scanning the VIPs greeting me, the flashes of cameras, the investors shaking my hand. "Wait," he said, lowering his voice. "You're Claire Ward, the CEO of—" "Yes," I cut in softly. "The one you used to think couldn't balance a checkbook." He opened his mouth, closed it, then whispered, I didn't know." "That's right," I said, taking a sip. "You didn't ask." He stared at me, speechless, guilt flickering through his eyes. "Vanessa told me. She said you were just—" I raised a hand. "Stop. Don't explain what another woman said about me. You already believed her once. That was enough." His throat bobbed. I made a mistake. I leaned closer, voice low but sharp. No, Michael, you made a choice. Mistakes are accidents. You packed your bags. He flinched slightly, then tried to recover. Vanessa. She's not who I thought she was. I tilted my head, pretending sympathy. None of us are. Some of us just hide better. He exhaled shakily. I lost everything, Claire. The deals, the investors. Even Vanessa left when the money ran out. I watched him struggle for breath, part of me wanting to comfort him, and another part remembering every lonely night he made me feel invisible. I'm sorry, he murmured. For what? I asked. For leaving, or for realizing I didn't need you to survive? He looked down. Both. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The music swelled around us, soft and cruel. People nearby clinked glasses and laughed, oblivious to the quiet war unfolding in their midst. Then I smiled. You should eat something, Michael. Regret burns calories. He winced. Claire, please. Can we just talk? Maybe start over? I stared at him for a long time. The audacity would have amused me if it weren't so tragic. Start over? I repeated. With a man who left me for glitter when I was the gold? His lips trembled. I didn't see it then. I placed my glass down. That's the thing about diamonds, Michael. Only the patient learn to recognize their worth. He looked at me one last time, helpless and small. I never thought I'd lose you. You didn't lose me, I said softly, stepping back. You let me go. And then for the second time, I turned my back on him. Only this time, I wasn't walking away from heartbreak. I was walking toward my power. That night, as I drove home, the city lights blurred through the windshield. Evelyn called. Everything okay? She asked. Yes, I said quietly. He saw me tonight. Oh? Her tone sharpened with curiosity. How'd that go? Like a mirror, I replied. He looked into what he could have been and didn't recognize it anymore. Evelyn chuckled softly. So what now? I glanced at the city skyline, its glow reflecting in my eyes. Now? We let the story write itself. Karma's just getting started. They say revenge is best served cold. But I've learned that true power doesn't serve revenge at all, it serves results. Weeks passed after the gala. Michael didn't contact me again, at least not directly. But his name began floating through business circles like a rumor too fragile to survive the truth. I didn't have to destroy him. His own choices were doing that for me. The universe has a way of using our mistakes as mirrors. And his reflection? It was starting to crack. It started with an invitation. A glossy envelope appeared on my desk one morning, embossed initials, elegant handwriting. V&M Enterprises charity dinner. Vanessa and Michael. I couldn't help but laugh. He's really clinging to that illusion. Evelyn leaned over my shoulder. They're hosting a charity event? With what money? Probably mine, I muttered. I tucked the invitation aside. I had no interest in watching their performance. But fate had a flair for irony, and I had learned to let the story unfold. 2 weeks later, headlines began to shift tone. Businesswoman Vanessa Clark, accused of fraudulent donations. V&M Enterprises, under investigation for financial mismanagement. Same people who once praised Vanessa for her luxury philanthropy now whispered, behind diamond glasses. It turned out that Vanessa's foundation had been funneling charity funds into her personal accounts, luxury cars, overseas trips, designer wardrobes, and Michael, in his desperate attempt to prove himself her equal, had signed half the documents without reading them. I remember sitting in my office that morning, sipping espresso, watching the news anchor announce the scandal with a thin smile. Evelyn burst in, holding her phone. Did you see this? Vanessa's company is collapsing. I nodded slowly. Every empire built on lies eventually meets gravity. But get this, she said, lowering her voice. One of the companies suing them is yours. I looked up sharply. What? She grinned. Through one of your subsidiaries. Remember Kingsley Holdings? They funded Vanessa's charity gala last spring. She defaulted on payment. Legal's been preparing a claim for months. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A deep, cathartic laugh that came from somewhere between irony and justice. The very company Vanessa stole from was owned by the woman her lover betrayed. Karma wasn't coming. It had arrived wearing heels and a power suit. A month later, the charity dinner that was supposed to repair their image turned into a public implosion. I hadn't planned to attend. But when Evelyn said quietly, "It's happening at the Langston again," something inside me decided otherwise. I arrived in silence. Sleek black gown, diamond cuff, confidence sharper than the glass of champagne in my hand. Cameras flashed as I entered, not because I demanded attention, but because power never needs to announce itself. It's recognized. Vanessa was radiant under the chandeliers, dressed in gold, every inch the woman who thought she'd won. Michael stood beside her, his smile tight, his hands fidgeting. When our eyes met across the room, his expression faltered. Vanessa's followed his gaze, and froze. I could almost hear the thoughts racing behind her painted smile. That's her? The woman he left? The one he said was plain, small, unambitious? The one who now owned half the room? Claire Ward, someone whispered behind me. Isn't she the silent investor in the Kingsley conglomerate? She's more than that, another replied. Rumor is, she's one of the wealthiest women in the state. Rumor, I thought. The safest truth? The evening unfolded like a slow-motion unraveling. The moment Vanessa took the stage, her microphone crackled, and reporters began receiving notifications on their phones. Live updates, leaks, financial records, screenshots, emails. Vanessa's voice trembled mid-sentence as the whispers grew. Her confident facade flickered. Then a journalist shouted, Miss Clark! Care to comment on the fraud allegations? Gasps, cameras, panic. Michael stepped forward, trying to calm the chaos, but the press was merciless. Mr. Hensley, did you authorize these transactions? Were you aware the donations were being misused? Did your wife manipulate your investors? I watched from my corner, serene, as the scene dissolved into chaos. This wasn't revenge. This was math. Actions, consequences, and simple addition. Vanessa's mask crumbled right there under the chandeliers. She snapped at a reporter, her voice sharp with panic. You don't understand. It was his idea. Michael's face went pale. Cameras flashed faster, and just like that, the glamorous duo became a live broadcast of downfall. I turned to leave. I'd seen enough. As I reached the exit, Michael caught up to me, breathless, eyes frantic. Claire! Wait! I turned slowly, the light catching my earrings like small bursts of lightning. What? I asked coolly. You knew this would happen, didn't you? I didn't need to know, I said. People who steal light always burn themselves out. He swallowed hard. I'm ruined. Everything's gone. You still have her, I said softly, nodding toward Vanessa, who, at that moment, was screaming at a security guard about unfair treatment. He followed my gaze, then looked down. No, he whispered. I don't. Then maybe now, I said. You can learn what enough really means. He exhaled shakily. Claire, if I could go back, I cut him off. You can't, but I can move forward. And with that, I walked away, not in anger, but in closure. That same week, I announced a new initiative, the Athena Project, a foundation to support women rebuilding their lives after financial betrayal. It went viral. Not because of my name, but because of the timing. Every headline about Vanessa and Michael's collapse mentioned me as the woman who turned pain into purpose. Investors flooded in. Celebrities endorsed it. Survivors wrote letters thanking me for speaking through silence. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't speaking to anyone. I was simply existing fully for the first time in years. Evelyn looked at me one evening across the office and said, You know, this could have been revenge. But it's not. No, I said. It's restoration, she smiled. And how does it feel? I looked out the window at the city that once felt too big for me, now small enough to hold in my palm. Like breathing fire, I said. One last encounter. 2 months later, I was visiting one of our new orphanage sites when I heard someone call my name. I turned. Michael stood there, wearing a simple coat, eyes tired but honest this time. I didn't come to beg, he said. I just wanted to thank you. For what? For not destroying me when you could have. I studied him carefully. You did that yourself, he nodded. You're right, there was silence. Then he said, You were always the strong one, Claire. I just didn't see it. I offered him a faint smile. That's because strength doesn't scream. It whispers. He nodded again, tears glinting in his eyes. I hope one day you forgive me, I sighed softly. I already have. I just haven't forgotten, and that was the truth. As he walked away, I felt no hate. Only closure. The quiet kind that doesn't need applause. That night, I wrote in my journal. He chased gold and found dust. I stayed still and became the mine. I closed the book, turned off the light, and smiled. Because this wasn't the end of the story. It was the rebirth of a woman who finally realized that losing love wasn't her tragedy. It was her awakening. Power is a strange thing. At first, it feels like armor and protective, radiant, intoxicating. But the longer you wear it, the heavier it becomes. After the collapse of Vanessa and Michael's empire, the world suddenly wanted to hear my voice. TV anchors called me the woman who turned betrayal into brilliance. Magazine covers labeled me the quiet queen. Every interview request, every invitation to speak, was wrapped in admiration and curiosity. But admiration is just a softer disguise for obsession. People wanted to know everything: how I felt when he left, how I discovered my power, whether I'd taken revenge. I learned to smile and deflect with grace. Because the truth, the messy, emotional, raw truth, wasn't for them. It was for me. It was late autumn when I finally agreed to one interview. The producer had begged for weeks, promising it would be tasteful, empowering. They sent a woman named Julia, gentle voice, intelligent eyes. She wasn't after gossip. She wanted humanity. We sat across from each other in my penthouse, cameras rolling quietly. Julia leaned forward. "Claire, the world knows your story, at least the parts we can read online. But what did that betrayal feel like?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't know, but because putting it into words felt like reopening a wound I'd learned to decorate. "It felt," I said slowly, "like standing in a burning house that everyone else kept calling beautiful." Julia nodded. "And what made you walk out?" "The moment I realized I wasn't saving love anymore, I was saving his comfort." Silence filled the room. Then Julia asked softly, "Do you still love him?" For a second, I couldn't breathe. The air thickened with the weight of honesty. "I love the version of him that existed before greed did," I said finally. "The man who used to dance with me in the kitchen at midnight. But that man's gone." I mourned him, not the one who stayed. Julia nodded again. "You rebuilt yourself spectacularly. Was it ever about proving him wrong?" I smiled faintly. "At first, yes, but now, it's about proving to myself that my peace is priceless." The episode aired 2 weeks later. It exploded across social media. Clips went viral. Quotes from the interview were turned into motivational reels. One line echoed everywhere: "I stopped saving love that didn't want to be saved." For the first time, my story wasn't just mine. It became a mirror for millions of women who had been quietly surviving their own heartbreaks. Evelyn showed me the analytics. "You've gained 500,000 followers in 3 days," I raised an eyebrow. "On what platform?" "All of them," she said, grinning. "But with attention comes shadows. The more public my power became, the more people wanted a piece of it. Men I'd never met started sending flowers. Business partners began treating me like a myth rather than a human being. And then, inevitably, Michael resurfaced." It started with a headline: "Michael Hensley breaks silence on infamous. Divorce, he'd agreed to his own. Interview," and the clips went viral for all. The wrong reasons. "I was blinded by greed," he said on live. "TV, Claire was always smarter than me. I was just too proud to see it." He paused, looking down. "If I could take it all back, I would." The host leaned in. "Do you still love her?" He smiled sadly. "Always. You don't stop loving the person who taught you what love should have been." I watched that clip alone in my office. No tears. No anger, just quiet. Evelyn found me later. "You saw it?" "Yes. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "He's doing what everyone does when the world stops clapping, looking for forgiveness." She hesitated. "Would you ever talk to him again?" "Closure doesn't always need a conversation," I said softly. Still, part of me couldn't ignore the flicker of nostalgia. Not love, but empathy. Because I remembered what it felt like to fall. And then, as if the universe wanted to test that empathy, fate sent him back into my orbit. It happened at a conference for social entrepreneurs. I was on stage speaking about the Athena Project when I saw him sitting quietly in the back row. He waited until after the event, when most guests had left, then approached with that hesitant smile I once fell for. "Claire," he said gently. "You were incredible up there." I smiled politely. "Thank you," he shifted nervously. "I wasn't sure you'd recognize me." "I'd recognize a lesson anywhere," I replied. He gave a soft laugh, the same one that used to make my heart skip. But now it only made me remember how much I'd grown. "Can we talk?" He asked. "Just 5 minutes." I hesitated, then nodded. Closure was one thing, avoidance another. We sat by the window overlooking the city. "I've been sober for 6 months," he said. "Therapy, rebuilding my life. Trying to fix what I broke." "That's good," I said genuinely. He looked down. "I've been working at a community center. It's not much, but it's honest. Sounds like peace, I said. He nodded. And you? You're everywhere. It's amazing to see. Power doesn't erase pain, I said. It just gives it a purpose. He nodded again, eyes glistening. Claire, I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to say thank you for not hating me. I studied his face. Older, humbler, softer. I don't hate you, Michael, I said quietly. You were my mirror. You showed me what parts of myself I'd abandoned. He swallowed. And now? Now I know my worth isn't measured by who stays, but by how I rise when they leave. He exhaled shakily. I hope you find someone who deserves you. I smiled faintly. I already did. He looked confused. You did? Yes, I said, standing. Me. And just like that, it was done. Not with bitterness, but with peace. After that meeting, I finally understood something I'd never said aloud. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's closure that no longer needs witnesses, but the world doesn't like peaceful endings. It prefers drama. A week later, tabloids ran photos of Michael and me at the conference, spinning headlines like, "Are they rekindling? Second chance love story?" Evelyn burst into my office waving her phone. "They're making it look like you're back together." I sighed. Let them. The truth doesn't need an audience, she frowned. You're really unbothered, huh? Because this time, I said, the narrative belongs to me. And that's when I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about redemption. It was about rebirth, the kind of rebirth that doesn't scream, "Look what I became," but whispers, "Look what I survived," and still became soft enough to love again. That night, I stood on my balcony again, the same place where this story had started months ago. Only now the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like completion. The city below sparkled like 1,000 possibilities. Somewhere out there, people were still whispering my name, speculating, idolizing, misunderstanding, but none of it mattered anymore, because I had finally learned that the truest kind of power isn't controlling others. It's mastering yourself. Time has a way of softening everything, even the sharpest memories. But some nights when the city hum quiets and the air smells like rain, I still think of how it all began. The lies, the leaving, the silence that followed, and how somehow that silence became the soundtrack of my rebirth. It's been 2 years since Michael walked out with a suitcase and a dream he thought I couldn't understand. 2 years since I sat in that quiet kitchen, staring at his wedding ring beside the coffee cup, realizing that love without respect isn't love. It's a leash. Now that same kitchen is gone. The house is gone. The woman I was? Gone too. The world knows me as Claire Stanton, philanthropist, investor, board member, the woman whose grace turned betrayal into brilliance. But beneath all that, I'm still just a woman who chose peace over pity. I never planned to fall in love again. After Michael, I thought my heart had retired. Still beating, but off duty. Then came Adrian. He wasn't a tycoon or an influencer. He wasn't even trying to impress me. He was a journalist, quiet, observant, the kind of man who noticed the small things everyone else missed. We met at a sustainability summit in Lisbon. He was covering the event. I was sponsoring one of the panels. He asked me one question no one had ever asked before. You've built empires in silence. Doesn't it ever get lonely up there? I laughed genuinely. Only when I looked down, he smiled. Then stopped looking down. There was something in his simplicity that disarmed me. He didn't see my wealth as a mystery to solve or a status to chase. He saw me as a person. Just me. Over time, his presence became a kind of quiet comfort. We'd walk along the coast in the evenings, no titles, no cameras, no weight of expectations. He never asked about Michael. He didn't need to. He understood that my past was not a scar, but a signature. One night, while watching the sunset, he said something that stayed with me. Some people build walls to keep pain out. You built bridges instead, and that's why you'll always be ahead. And just like that, I realized I wasn't afraid of love anymore. I was just waiting for it to look different, but life has a poetic way of circling back. One afternoon, Evelyn walked into my office holding a tablet, her expression unreadable. Claire, you might want to see this. On the screen was a headline that made my stomach tighten, not from pain, but recognition. Vanessa Ward declares bankruptcy. Fashion empire crumbles amid scandal. The article detailed everything: unpaid taxes, failed investments, lawsuits. Apparently, she'd been using shell companies to fund her brand, and when the creditors caught up, there was nothing left to hide behind. Buried near the end of the piece was a small paragraph. Sources confirm that her husband, attorney Michael Hensley, has also filed for financial restructuring following his wife's legal issues. Evelyn looked at me carefully. Do you want to issue a statement? The press might ask for a comment. I smiled faintly. No, let silence do the talking. Later that night, as rain streaked down my windows, I thought about them, about how desperately they had chased the illusion of wealth while I had quietly owned it. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was closure, because the universe doesn't forget. It just takes its time balancing the scales. Weeks passed. Life moved on. Meetings, events, laughter with Adrian, plans for new projects. Then one afternoon, my doorman called. Ms. Stanton, there's a visitor downstairs. Says it's urgent, I frowned. Who? He hesitated. A Mr. Hensley. For a moment, I said nothing. Then quietly, send him up. When the elevator doors opened, I barely recognized him. He looked thinner, older, his eyes tired. The tailored arrogance was gone, Claire, he said softly. You look incredible. Thank you. He lingered near the door, unsure whether to sit. Vanessa left, he said finally, after the bankruptcy. She took what little was left and disappeared. I nodded, unmoved. She blamed me, of course, he continued. But I think deep down she knew she'd built everything on lies. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I remembered from our college days, the nervous tell before a confession. I came to say I'm sorry. Not for leaving, because maybe that was what needed to happen for both of us to grow, but for underestimating you. For thinking you were small when you were the universe itself. I looked at him, really looked. For the first time, I didn't see the man who betrayed me. I saw a boy who had finally learned the cost of his own illusions. I don't hate you, Michael, I said quietly. You were a chapter, not the ending. He smiled sadly. You really are different now. No, I said. I'm just no longer afraid to be seen. He swallowed hard. Do you ever think about us? I smiled faintly. I used to. But now I only think about who I became because of us. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. You found peace. Yes, I said. And I hope you do too. He stood there for another moment, as if trying to memorize the woman he once forgot to understand. Then with a quiet nod, he turned and left. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just stood there in the golden silence of my apartment, feeling nothing but gratitude. Months later, the same gala where everything had once come full circle returned, the Spring Hearts fundraiser. This time I was the keynote speaker. The ballroom glittered beneath chandeliers. Cameras flashed, but my heart was steady. As I walked onto the stage, applause erupted. I took a slow breath and began. 2 years ago, I stood in a different room, a different version of myself. I was quiet then, not because I lacked a voice, but because I was learning which silence was strength and which was surrender. Hush fell across the room. I learned that sometimes losing what you thought you needed is the only way to find what you truly deserve. And I learned that grace isn't weakness. It's power that doesn't need to announce itself. Applause thundered again. When I stepped down from the stage, I saw Adrian waiting for me near the edge of the crowd, his smile warm and proud. You were brilliant, he whispered, kissing my forehead. Thank you, I said softly. For seeing me when I wasn't shining yet, he grinned. You were never not shining, Claire. You just didn't notice. After the gala, we drove home in quiet comfort. The city lights flickered past like fading memories. When we reached my penthouse, I poured 2 glasses of wine and stepped onto the balcony. The skyline stretched endlessly, the same view I'd once watched alone, now shared with someone who didn't need to own me to value me. Do you ever think about them? Adrian asked gently. Sometimes, I admitted, but only the way you think about a storm after the sun comes out, with gratitude that it's over. He smiled. You know, you could write a book about this, I laughed. I already lived one, he clinked his glass against mine. To peace, then. To peace, I echoed, smiling at the city below. In the weeks that followed, the world kept spinning. New headlines, new projects, new beginnings. But my story, Our story remained a quiet reminder of something timeless, that strength isn't in proving people wrong. It's in proving yourself right, that silence can be the loudest revenge, and that sometimes the best closure is living a life they can never touch. When I think back to that day Michael left, I don't see pain anymore. I see liberation wrapped in heartbreak. Because if he hadn't left, I would never have learned how limitless I truly was. I don't wish him pain. I don't even wish him regret. I just wish him the same thing I finally gave myself: clarity. That night, as the city drifted to sleep, I stood by the window one last time. Below, the lights shimmered like promises. And somewhere out there, a man who once thought I was beneath him now knows. He was living in a house built by a queen he never recognized. I took a deep breath, smiled, and whispered to the night, "You thought I couldn't understand luxury. But darling, I was born of it." The glass of wine caught the reflection of the skyline, glittering, endless, alive, and with that I turned off the lights, walked toward the quiet warmth of a new life, and finally, truly, closed the door. The end.